well.
Well, I think for the vast majority of students they do, but there are plenty of issues that that have come up recently, including class size and a lot of other programs. The budget is going to be cut again this year in Manchester by a lot, it looks like. And so I think there are some issues where they're not following the contract. So as long as they follow the contract that they have with Hooksett, I think, yes, they serve Hooksett well. But if they're not following the contract, then no.
Mr. David.
I think that Manchester Central and West are educationally fine schools. They, an education is what you put into it. However, the demographics of Central and West are clearly not what Hooksett is. So I think there needs to be some sort of balance in there. So there is an educational, they can provide the information, but can they provide a quality of sociological aspects? Well, not so certain.
Thank you. Ms. Reed.
I believe that every child is an individual, and Manchester, West, and Central, and even Memorial may offer some great opportunities for some of our children, but not every child. Every child, just like every one of us, is an individual and should be treated differently and fairly to help reach their career goals in their life and accomplish the achievements that they've set out to achieve. There are some deficiencies in Manchester that need to be addressed, and I think we need a much tighter rein on what they're doing.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
I think we have a good education that we receive, students receive from Central and West. They do have an option between Central and West. There are certainly issues. There would be issues even if Hooksett had a high school right next door. We wouldn't be able to offer everything. What we need to do is, which we have, apply the pressure to Manchester to make sure they have held their contract. We did that. We got results, and what we need to do is continue to do that, and I think we've been doing that. Maybe 10, 12 years ago we may have not been, but we're doing a good job, and they're great schools.
Thank you. Mr. Pearl?
I think it depends on when you take the snapshot. Unfortunately, the structure of their funding goes down one year, up another year. They're locked in with the city. So it's not just the school department's fault, but if they lose funding. 2 or 3 years ago, they laid off like 100 teachers. I was at the meeting when the superintendent told us that they had hired them all, 90%, they were back to staff. But I asked him how many of the teachers that you laid off came back and how many were new. It was about 50%. So just through that budget cycle, they lose that stability. Hooksett, we have great stability, and some of the other high schools are able to continue that, so you keep good teachers. They don't run to another school where there's better stability. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now next question, we'll start with Mr. Damon. This is a 1-minute question. School board members must balance the interests and needs of students on the one hand and taxpayers on the other. Occasionally, a policy or voting position puts these interests at odds with each other. In these cases, would you be more likely to vote for the students or for the taxpayers?
It's a fairly short answer on that one. I would certainly be more willing to vote for the students. Money can be re-earned. It can be, you can get more money, but once you have a student, that's it. You're done with that student. So if it's a clash between money and student.
Ms. Reedy?
I think if it was between the taxpayers and the students, I always look at things a little differently and try to find a compromise. I think out-of-the-box thinking sometimes is where you need to go, especially in today's economy, and really look at how you could come to some sort of compromise that would benefit both parties. It's not always going to be perfect, and you're not always going to please everyone, but there should be some sort of happy medium that you could come to. And that's really how I look at everything I do.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
For 12 years, I voted for things that would benefit the student. If it happens to result in a reduction in taxing, so be it. If it doesn't, we need to explain why we need something and show the results on why we're spending that money. Doing what's best for the kids is, I think, a family trait, and I have to kudos to my grandmother who taught in Hooksett for 45 years. So between her and myself, I think kids have been number one, and that's what all I can do is vote what's best for the kids, as the credo that David R. Colley, who the school is named after, that was his mantra, and I think I have followed that.
Thank you. Ms. Fourum?
I don't think it's a realistic question. As a school board member, you create a budget, you submit it to the budget committee, they may change it. Ultimately, it's you folks that have to decide whether you're going to vote for the taxpayer or the student. The school board is making the recommendation, the budget committee makes a recommendation, but it's ultimately the voters. Whatever that number that comes back, the school board has to decide what they can do with that money. They have a bottom line budget, but I do not see a scenario where you're voting yes for the student and no for the taxpayer. Maybe more so on the budget committee, but ultimately at the poll where we'll all be going soon. Thank you.
Yes, I don't see it as a choice between student and taxpayer at all, and maybe that's where my education experience would help. It doesn't mean you throw more money at the students and that's better for the students and worse for the taxpayer, or vice versa. There's many, many things that can be done, and they're not pitted against each other. I think you do what's best for the students with what the taxpayers have given to you.
Okay. Thank you. We've gone through everything, right, on that one?
Yes.
All right, next question is 1 minute. We'll start with Ms. Regan. What are the characteristics of a successful school board meeting, and how would you personally contribute to that success?
I think a successful school board meeting is that you have an agenda, you have items that need to be addressed, they are addressed, discussed, you listen to the public that's there, who might have more knowledge of the situation than you do. You communicate with your other board members, and you make some decisions that you know is the right choice, and you're speaking for the community. So you run an organized meeting, you have an agenda, and you listen to what your constituents are saying and what needs to be done to make the right choices. I see a lot of time in those meetings that's really wasted. I mean, I'm watching people play with their iPads and play with their day timers and, you know, shaking their feet. They have absolutely checked out. And you can do a meeting in a lot shorter time than that, and you can engage people in what's going on, and I really believe that.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Having responsibility of creating agendas as chairman of the school board in the past, council and so forth, we need to make sure that the issues that need to be presented and discussed are on there. We provide adequate debate. And sometimes if we don't have enough time, we need to postpone it to gather information. We need to follow the rules that we have established, whether public input or not. If we have those rules, we have abilities for students or parents to interject at certain points based on whether the school board agrees. Agendas are tricky things. Short agendas tend to go on. Long agendas don't go as long as we need to provide adequate input, discussion, question and answer period, and use the resources of the principals who are there. And I have something else, but I'll get that somewhere else.
Thank you. Ms. Crowe?
I would welcome people to the meeting. I would require that all the administrators that are sitting at the table are totally focused on the meeting and not working on laptops and devices, as is now happening. I would provide an adequate table for public input where a person could sit down comfortably with some paperwork, feel comfortable, and address the board. I also think it's important to work through an agenda and be flexible in that agenda when you have people that show up that may be giving a presentation or something. Or if you can bend that agenda a little bit because something does become interested to the public that's there, that is going to encourage them to come back because they feel like they're involved. Yes, we have to get the business done, but ultimately the engagement of the public will create more people to run for school board, more people to be involved and educated about what's going on, and ultimately will bring rewards to our school district. Thank you.
Let's do this.
Yes, well, definitely the meetings themselves can be much more efficient, and I've been to meetings where I could not hear a word that was being said. And so that part of it has to be a better display and a better way to do that, an audio recording or some other type of setup, that microphone maybe. I'm sure they have a microphone down in the band room, a few rooms down, you know, that we could use. But there's been some meetings you can't hear anything, and there are meetings when people aren't paying attention and doing whatever. So it can be run a lot more efficiently and get things done and form good policies rather than just sitting there and not really know what's going on.
Thank you. Mr. Damon?
I think my definition of a successful board meeting would be where the agenda items are addressed, either resolved at that particular time or a time frame when that would be resolved is set. Expectations are known to the public that are in attendance, so that there is a reasonable expectation that what's being discussed is going to be resolved in a timely manner. That you can define success as when the public that is paying for all the things here is satisfied with what's going on. If the public is leaving and things are not answered and they're not satisfied, then it's not successful. So there needs to be certainly the interaction with the public, but things need to be resolved or put on a schedule to be resolved, so that and you know, that timetable can be kept.
Thank you. Next question is, we'll start with Mr. Sullivan. This is a 2-minute question. And just so that you know, we're going to finish this round of questions, then I'll ask one question of each candidate that is individual. And at that point, if you have questions from the audience, we'll take those. Please put them in writing and give them to Mary Farlow. Okay, Mr. Sullivan, if state and federal resources for education continue to dwindle, much greater pressure will be exerted on the Hooksett school budget. In that case, what, if anything, at this point, do you believe might be a valid target for reducing expenditures in the district's budget? Or how else might you consider closing the budget gap?
Probably the most difficult question so far from my point of view. What we need to do is, as I mentioned before, Hooksett has shown that we're able to reduce the cost per student and gain high marks on student achievement. Money is not necessarily the answer, and I think providing the resources, being creative, coming up with efficiencies that we have over the last 12 years, which does result in some fund balances. Some fund balances are high school issues. That's something we need to work on. To pinpoint things, we probably could work out by looking at supplies, whether we can work with the town or collectively with other school districts within the SAU to reduce paper costs by getting bulk. That certainly is one thing right off the bat. Beyond that, it's tough to gauge that because we have to figure out exactly what we're going to have. And at each year, we have a different figure that we have to deal with. The fluctuation of state funds from the Clear Knot Division is not an easy task. We need to look at the budget fully, and if we're going to reduce, the only thing we should not be reducing right off the bat is things that have direct impact on student learning, this child-centered programs. Other areas that don't have direct impact on the students certainly could be looked at. Insurance savings, we did go with another group and we found insurance savings which existed last year and will exist today, next year.
Thank you. Mr. Pearl.
While sitting on the budget committee this year, I made the motion to cut the funding for a curriculum coordinator. I believe in a bottom-up theory of education in our school. What a staff you have of educated people, some with master's degrees, so forth, specialties. I feel that we should pay stipends to those people in the grade levels to do the curriculum coordination. Stipends are very efficient. They can be targeted. They can save money. We don't pay benefits on stipends. I think it also empowers the teachers to use some of the education they've got in their master's program to create curriculum. That brings them into the process. You'll start getting 120% out of them when it's their curriculum that's being